Hello and welcome back by Directory family. I hope you all are doing great. And in this single video, I'm going to cover entire life process chapter. So let's get started. In life process, what we actually study is about the criteria on the basis of which we say the living organisms are alive. And these are certain defining features of all living organism. Either it is a single cellular or it is a multicellular organism. Now, what are these criteria? These criteria can be growth and development. They can be physiological functions. And they can be metabolic activities. So these are some important criteria of all living organisms. And out of these, the metabolic activities are the most defining feature. And why I am saying this? Because this metabolic function occurs in all organisms in the form of chemical reactions. So when the chemical reactions are taking place, what is happening actually? They are forming products. And when the products are formed, those products are absorbed by the body. So these metabolic activities or the chemical reactions form product, and these products are absorbed by the body. For example, if I take an example of a photosynthesis process, in that process what is happening here? Plants are making their own food in the form of glucose molecule, right? So that glucose molecule is the formed product. That glucose molecule is a formed product, and that formed product will provide energy to the entire plant by producing ATP. And how it will produce ATP? By breaking down the glucose molecule. So these chemical activities are classified as anabolic activities. Anabolic activities are those activities where the products are formed, and catabolic activities are those where the products are broken down, right? So these are the two types of activities or the chemical reaction under the metabolic activities. And these metabolic activities, when the chemical reactions are taking place here, these chemical reactions are actually helping the physiological system of a body to perform their functions. We will go in detail about this in this chapter, that digestive system, respiratory system, circulatory system, excretion. In all these activities, in all these functions, the chemical reactions are ongoing, and what they are doing, they are forming the products. Now, when the products are formed, that product are either helpful or they produce byproducts, right? For example, when the glucose molecule is produced in photosynthesis, there are other substances formed which are as a byproduct. What are those? They are oxygen and they are water, right? So these are the byproducts of the plant, and these byproducts are important to be eliminated from the plant, because in the process of synthesis, carbon dioxide is required and water molecules are required, right? Similarly, in the case of humans also and other simple living organisms, excretion of byproducts are important, like CO2 is harmful for humans, nitrogenous wastage. All these things are the detox material for the plant, for the humans. So it is important to be eliminated from the body. So that's why elimination of byproduct is also important, and these byproducts are also forming in this chemical reaction process only. So metabolic activities are forming the product which are helpful for the animals or plants or living organisms, and the byproducts which are toxic needed to be eliminated from the body to not cause any harm in the functions of any of the system. So this is about the criteria of living organism. Similarly, physiological function we will study both in plants and animals. We will study about digestive system, we will study about respiration, we will study about circulatory system or transportation, we will study about excretion, So all these things we will study under the physiological functions, and those all these physiological functions are simultaneously related to the metabolic functions. I hope till here it is clear. And why these processes are occurring in a living organism? Because they are maintaining a balance in all type of living organisms. Now, these metabolic activities will occur in simple living organisms also, where the whole life dependency is on a single cell. So when the life is dependent on a single cell, then all these physiological function and metabolic activities takes place inside the cytoplasm region of a cell or in the single cell body. So what will happen here? Here the transportation, exchange of water and gases will take place through the body surface only. So here we call it by the process of simple diffusion and osmosis. Because here we will see no modified structure which are able to perform a specific function. But in case of humans and higher order plants, we see that they have a complex type of system, they have a specific type of cells, specific type of tissues, organ system to perform specific functions. But in case of simple organisms, we only see that all the functions are occurring to the body surface itself. So these are the points about the metabolic activities. So coming on to our next topic, which is nutrition. We know that whenever we talk about nutrition, it is related with the consumption of food, right? Because food is a major source of energy, and the form of energy are proteins, carbohydrates, fats, lipids, vitamins and minerals. So these are the important source of energy, and from where we are getting this source? From the food that we are consuming. Now when we talk about nutrition, there are two types of major modes of nutrition. One is autotrophic and second one is heterotrophic. So when we talk about autotrophic mode of nutrition means that organisms that can synthesize their own food. And under this category, we place mainly the green plants, right? Where we are placing green plants, we can also place some bacteria also, which are taking their food by the mode of autotroph. Now, when we are talking about plants, which are primary producers of food, what they are actually doing, they are taking inorganic sources from the environment, right? They are taking inorganic sources from the environment and they are converting it into the organic molecule. For example, in case of plant, we know that the glucose molecules are formed. So here plant will take carbon dioxide and water, and this process, the taking of carbon dioxide and H2O, which is inorganic molecule, will be absorbed in the presence of sunlight. It will be absorbed in the presence of sunlight, and where this process is taking place? In chlorophyll part. Chlorophyll is basically the green pigment of plant where this photosynthesis takes place. And with all these things, we will get the product glucose. Now glucose is basically a simple sugar, 6 carbon molecule. And this 6 carbon molecule which is formed is the nutrient source for a plant, which is glucose. So this source of carbohydrate is coming from the process of photosynthesis, and they are able to perform photosynthesis in the presence of inorganic molecules, and the steps which are involved here in the photosynthesis process are absorption, then it is conversion, and third one is reduction. Now with these 3-step process, the plants are able to photosynthesize their food in the form of glucose. So glucose is the formed product which is essential for plants. But there are other products also which are forming, they are to be eliminated from the body, because this is basically a chemical reaction which is taking place within the plant, which is a part of metabolic activity. So the other products which will form are oxygen and water are released from the body of plant. So this glucose molecule is an essential product. And what are the 3 steps which are taking place here? Absorption, conversion and reduction. Where it is taking place, it is taking place within the chlorophyll pigment. Okay? And where these chlorophyll pigments are present, they are mainly present in the plastid, which is a cell organelle. We have studied in class 9th also, right? Where you must have studied about the simple permanent tissues. In simple permanent tissues, we know that there are parenchymatous tissues, collenchyma and sclerenchyma, out of which parenchyma tissues are mainly responsible for this. Okay, so this is about the process of taking food in plant, and they are autotrophs, and from where they are consuming, they are taking inorganic sources to make their product. Now second, we will talk about heterotrophic mode of nutrition. And in heterotrophic mode of nutrition, the organisms are dependent on other organisms for their energy source, right? So here we include animals. There can be carnivores, herbivores, scavengers, parasites, saprophytes. So all those organisms which are dependent on other organisms for their food sources are placed under heterotrophic mode of nutrition, because they are not synthesizing their food, they are dependent on other sources. But in case of plant, we have seen that they are synthesizing their food from the things present in their surrounding, right, in the form of inorganic. Now one thing more I will add here in photosynthesis, that this glucose is a single product which is formed. Now this photosynthesis takes place in the daytime in plant, and this glucose molecule is a simple sugar molecule. The food gets stored within the plant is in the form of polysaccharide, which we call is starch. So starch is a polysaccharide which is a stored food material of plants, right, which is a complex form. And here we talked about heterotrophs, that in heterotrophs we include saprophytes, parasites, scavengers, herbivores and carnivores. So this is the difference between autotrophs and heterotrophs. One example we will take here of amoeba, where they do not have any special type of organ system to take their food. How they take their food is by the process of phagocytosis. Now phagocytosis is the process by which the membrane of these amoeba, basically amoeba is an irregular shaped organism, right, and this membrane movement is known as pseudopodia or false beat in simple language. So what we observe here, that whenever there is a food particle present near, this pseudopodia will try to trap the food molecule, food vacuole, food particle around it by the movement of its membrane, and they will engulf it, It will cover it and it will engulf the food particle forming food vacuole inside the body. So this is a simpler type of process in amoeba where we call it phagocytosis. This is the engulfment of food particle from its surrounding. So this is about autotrophin. And now next we will see about detailed human digestive system. Our next subtopic is human digestive system. And in human digestive system we are going to understand about two important things. One is alimentary canal and other is digestive glands. Now when we talk about digestive system in human, we start from the step which is ingestion. Now ingestion is the first step from where we intake our food, followed by absorption, then assimilation, and then egestion. So these are the major steps in human digestive system, starting from mouth, from where we are taking food, and anus, through which the byproduct or the waste product from or the food material which is undigested needed to be eliminated. So when we talk about alimentary canal, alimentary canal is the longest canal in our body, and through this canal the food get passed, starting from buccal cavity, and in buccal cavity there are teeth, tongue, salivary glands. So all these things together help in the mastication of food. So when we are consuming food, it is in a complex form, and what is happening here in buccal cavity, it is partially digesting the food. It is partially digesting the food. Now in which teeth, tongue, salivary glands, all these things are involved for the mastication, and what they turn that food into a chyme. So when we are consuming food, it is in its complex form, and when the chyme is formed, it is basically a partial digested food, which is, if we take an example of starch, which is a complex form, right? Starch are polysaccharides, and when the mastication took place and the chyme is formed, it get converted into maltose, which is a disaccharide form. Right? So this conversion from polysaccharide to disaccharide is due to the presence of salivary amylase, is due to the presence of tongue, which is the most strongest muscular organ in our body, and teeth, which is helping in partial digestion of food, converting complex food into the disaccharide form of food. Further, when the chyme is formed, it is passed through esophagus. Now in esophagus there is a peristaltic movement, which is in a wave form motion, and the cells present inside, the muscles present inside the esophagus is a sphincter form, or we call it sphincter muscles. What they actually do, they prevent the blood flow of the food, because food is passing from buccal cavity, from mouth, through esophagus into the stomach. So these sphincter muscles are preventing the backflow and helping the passage of food in a single direction. So that role is played by esophagus. And when food comes into the stomach, in the stomach there is a secretion of gastric juices. There is a secretion of gastric juices. We call it hydrochloric acid, which is an acid, right? Now this secretion of hydrochloric acid convert food into acidic form, and apart from HCl, we also call it pepsin. Now what will happen here? The food will get converted into acidic nature. And where these gastric juices are present, the stomach walls secrete mucus. Mucus secretion helps in preventing the concentrated acid to react with the inner lining or walls of the stomach. Next, this particular thing takes place in the food where the food gets converted into acidic form. Now there are certain other glands present like pancreas, liver. What they actually do, pancreas' role is to neutralize the food. Neutralize the food, how? The pancreas secretes alkaline solutions. Pancreas secretes alkaline solution, and along with this, these pancreas are also responsible for the blood sugar level maintenance by secretion of insulin, right? So these roles are played by pancreas in our body. What bile juice? This liver basically helps in the secretion of bile juice. Now liver don't produce any enzymes, but what they do, they secrete bile, and this bile helps in breaking down of large fat molecules or globules into small globules, or we call it glycerols, right? So these are the roles of certain digestive system, organ systems and glands. And further, when the food becomes alkaline and pancreatic juices secretion makes it alkaline, it further gets passed into the small intestine. Now there is a change in morphology of small intestine of herbivores and carnivores. In case of herbivores, the small intestines are more coiled. More coiled because the plant on which the herbivores animal feed, they have to digest the cellulose, which is basically the cell wall composition of plants. So that's why small intestine in herbivores are more coiled structure than carnivores, because carnivores don't have to digest the cellulose, right? So that's why the small intestine structure is more coiled in herbivores as compared to carnivores. Now in small intestine, what will happen? From 80 to 90% we can say the absorption takes place where, because in small intestine there are several enzymes which are secreted, and the food molecules which we are taking in a complex form get converted into different biomolecules product which are required by the body. For example, they secrete trypsin, they secrete lipase enzymes to break proteins, to break fat molecules, lipid molecules. So most of the absorption process takes place within the small intestine. And small intestines are coiled structure, and along with that they are having finger-like projection which we call microvilli. Now microvilli increases the surface area, and those surface area of microvilli are basically having blood vessels connected with them. More coiled structure in small intestine which are microvilli, and those microvilli they are connected with the blood vessels through which the food get absorbed. Now in a small intestine, what we have seen, that most of the solid part of the food is getting converted into the necessary nutrients and getting transmitted into the body by the absorption process which is taking place in the small intestine. Further, what will happen after the food get absorbed, remaining food part get transmitted into the large intestine part. In large intestine, there is mainly a reabsorption of water. Reabsorption of water will take place in large intestine. And further, the remaining undigested food from large intestine will pass into the anus, which is carrying the undigested food or the unabsorbed food or the byproducts which are needed to be eliminated from the body, and that work is done by the anus. through which the undigested food get eliminated. So this is about human digestive system. Next we will discuss about respiration, and respiration process is different from breathing. When we talk about breathing, it is actually inhalation or exhalation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. But when we talk about respiration, it is actually a chemical reaction. It is actually a chemical reaction where ATP productions are taking place. Now when we are talking about ATP productions, that means ATPs are basically the energy currency of cell. They are the energy currency of cells. So in respiration, what is actually happening? The respiration process can occur either in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. When the respiration process occurs in presence of oxygen, when oxygen is required, we call it aerobic respiration. And when oxygen is not required, O2 is not required, we call it anaerobic respiration. So we will understand what this respiration process is. See, in respiration, what is happening? In previous case, we have seen where digestion is taking place, the complex foods are getting converted into different energy sources, right? Different nutrient sources. When those nutrient sources are absorbed by the body, they further help in the production of ATP. How? Those formed product will further go under catabolic reactions, and in those catabolic reactions, what will happen? That particular food source or the nutrient source will break down and it will produce energy. How? For example, if I take an example of glucose, which we had seen, right? So when the glucose are formed, it is actually a 6-carbon molecule, right? So glucose will get converted into 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvate, and this process is known as glycolysis. Now please try to understand what is happening in respiration. Respiration is actually a chemical reaction, right, where catabolic reaction is taking place. The formed products are getting broken down. So from glucose, it will convert into 3-carbon molecules. 3-carbon molecules, 2 molecules of 3-carbon, it will form by the process of glycolysis. Now this glycolysis process is taking place within the cytoplasm of the cell. Within the cytoplasm of the cell, where this pyruvate thing is formed, or sometimes it is also written as pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acids. Now what will happen? This process took place in the cytoplasm, that is glycolysis. Now this pyruvate will go and within the mitochondria of cell, which is a cell organelle, in this mitochondria, what will happen? In the presence of oxygen, this pyruvate will get converted into carbon dioxide, right? It will get converted into carbon dioxide and in water molecules. So when these conversions are taking place, it is also producing ATPs, and the maximum number of ATPs are formed in this mitochondria, because in mitochondria, with the presence of oxygen, the ATP synthase enzymes are there. ATP synthase enzymes are there which get activated, and due to the activation of these ATP synthase enzyme, ATP synthesis products are higher in number as compared to the anaerobic. We will come on to anaerobic also. So in the presence of oxygen, the pyruvate will get converted into carbon dioxide and the energy is produced. So this type of reaction is known as cellular respiration. Now what will happen in anaerobic reaction? In anaerobic reaction, this glucose to pyruvate formation will take in a similar way, but due to non-presence of oxygen, because they are occurring in absence of oxygen. So what they actually do, they form, from glucose they form pyruvate, and from pyruvate, if it is yeast, it will form 2 carbon molecule and ATP energy in the absence of oxygen. And in case of lactic acid, production, lactic acids are produced within the muscles due to fatigue, right? So they will form 3 carbon molecules. So these 2 reactions are taking place when there is no oxygen. So the ATP production in both these reactions will be less. ATP productions are less in anaerobic, but ATP production will be high in aerobic, because we have seen that there are ATP synthesis enzymes, and these ATP synthesis enzymes are only getting activated when the oxygen is present. Now this reaction is very much in detail, but that is not a part of your syllabus. So here tricarboxylic acid takes place, or we call it a Krebs cycle. So that will be a more detail, but it is not in your syllabus. So you just have to understand that in the presence of aerobic respiration, the ATP production are higher as compared to the ATP produced within the anaerobic respiration, where the oxygen is absent. Now this respiration is basically the chemical reaction. Okay, respiration is different from breathing, because this is actually the reaction, or this is actually the process of respiration, and it is different from breathing. Now next we will see about human respiratory system, right, where we include all the organ systems which are helping in this process. Basically, if we talk about respiratory system, and in respiratory system, lungs are playing the essential role, right? Lungs are playing essential role, and within lungs there are units which we call alveoli, and those alveoli are actually helping in these reactions. Okay, so what is happening there? When we are taking air, okay, when we are inhaling, so while we are inhaling, the oxygen along with the atmospheric air moves inside, and through the nasal passage and passing through trachea, it reaches to the lung, and within lungs there are branch like structures which we call them bronchioles or bronchi, right? And on these bronchi there are sac-like structure, and these sac-like structures are known as alveoli. Now within these alveoli, this respiration process where the exchange of gases are taking place. So when we are breathing in, the oxygen present within the nasal passage and reaching till the tissues or body tissues where this cellular respirations are taking place, till there oxygen level is higher, and within the tissues the carbon dioxide level is high. Why I am saying this? The carbon dioxide levels are higher within the tissues, because within the tissues the metabolic reactions are taking place, and the formed products are carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide, which is a formed product, are harmful for our body, and carbon dioxides are basically the byproducts which are forming in these cellular respiration reactions. So it is important to be eliminated from the blood, right? Eliminated from the body. So that's why the exchange take place. So within the tissues, carbon dioxide level is higher than the oxygen. So when oxygen comes inside the cell, at that time CO2 is higher within the cell, because it is a byproduct, and that's why exchange take place. So CO2 moves out, oxygen moves in, and CO2 moves through the deoxygenated blood, and finally from lungs we exhale it, right? So this is about the respiratory system in human. Next we will talk about circulatory system, where we will see about double circulation, discuss about circulatory system or the transportation process. Now what is actually happening here in transportation, the connective tissues, or we can say that fluid connective tissues are responsible. When we are talking about fluid connective tissues, they mainly are of two types. One is blood and other one is lymph. Now in case of lymph, what is happening? The intercellular space are filled by this lymph or tissue fluid. But in case of blood, the blood is actually are divided into three categories. They are erythrocytes, they are leukocytes, and they are platelets. Platelets, which is responsible for clotting factors, leukocytes helping in killing germ cells, and erythrocytes are mainly responsible for the carrier of oxygen. And how they are able to carry the oxygen? Because of the presence of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin are the red pigments which are responsible for binding oxygen. And this oxygen is transported by our circulatory system. And along with the transportation of this oxygen, they are also working in purification mechanism also. So in purification, we will understand about double circulatory system as well as the function of blood vascular system or heart, right? So what is happening in case of heart? First we will try to understand that heart of human are having 4 chambers. And in these 4 chambers, they are right atrium, right ventricle, they are left atrium and left ventricle. Now these are the 4 main chambers. In this right atrium and right ventricle, there is deoxygenated blood present. And within this left atrium and left ventricle, the oxygenated blood is present. Now how this whole thing work? In right atrium, the impure blood comes from vena cava. So vena cava are basically the vessels which carry deoxygenated blood, and these vena can be superior. These vena cava are actually superior and inferior vena cava. Superior means that they are carrying deoxygenated blood from upper part of a body, and from the lower part of the body, inferior vena cava carries the deoxygenated blood. And through these vena cava, the blood comes into the right atrium. Now, the heart is made up of muscles. So, their property is to contract and relax. So, when do they contract and relax? When from vena cava, the blood comes into the right atrium, or in left atrium, when from pulmonary veins blood comes into left atrium, what is happening here? Here, when this right atrium is collecting the blood, it is getting relaxed. When it is collecting blood from vena cava to right atrium, it is getting relaxed. And after when it passes blood from the valves to the right ventricle, now this right atrium will contract and this right ventricle will start getting relaxed. So this contraction and relaxation of heart is known as systole and diastole. Okay, so systole means contraction and diastole means relaxation. So this is how the blood is pumped from this chamber. So we have seen that from vena cava the blood is coming into the right atrium and then it is passing to the right ventricle. Okay, and here what we see that from pulmonary veins the blood is coming into the left atrium, and from valve it is getting passed into the left ventricle, because it is carrying an oxygenated blood, it will further pass blood into the aorta, and from aorta it will get passed into the pulmonary arteries, right? And here what will happen? From this right ventricle, the blood will get passed into the pulmonary artery. The blood will get passed into the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery carries blood which is in impure form, and this pulmonary artery will transfer the deoxygenated blood into the lung capillaries. It will transfer the blood into lung capillaries. These pulmonary arteries will carry impure blood, and then it will pass it to lung capillaries. Now here lung capillaries are actually the network. They are in the tubes form, and they are actually the networks in which this purification of blood takes place. And now when the blood gets purified from pulmonary veins, it gets passed into the left atrium, and from left atrium to left ventricle, and from aorta it will move into the, or it will get transported into other parts of body through arteries. Now this diagram may be getting confusing for you, but here are certain terms which you have to remember. These are like, first, which is very important term, is arteries and veins. Now arteries are majorly carrying oxygenated blood in our body. They are carrying oxygenated blood, whereas veins, they carry deoxygenated blood. Arteries, what they do, they take blood away from the heart. They take blood away from the heart, whereas they take towards the heart. They take blood towards the heart. They take blood towards the heart. Now there is one exception in both the cases. In arteries, pulmonary artery, they carry deoxygenated blood, and in veins, pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood. So these are some differences between arteries and veins, and these differences are very important when you are studying about double circulatory system, right? And further, from pulmonary arteries, which is carrying blood which is in deoxygenated part, it will get passed into the lung capillaries, and lung capillaries will purify the blood and it will pass into the pulmonary vein. And from pulmonary vein, it will reach to the left atrium, and then it will pass into the left ventricle, and from aorta it will go within the body, it will get transported into the body, and from the capillaries of body and other organs, from there they will collect the deoxygenated blood into the veins, and from veins or from vena cava it will then come back to the right atrium and right ventricle, and this is how the whole function of circulatory pathway takes place. So now next we are going to discuss about transportation in plant. So when we are talking about transportation in plant, we are actually talking about the conduction of food, water and minerals. So these conduction or the transportation are taking place through the complex tissues of plant, which are xylem and phloem, or we also call them vascular bundles, right? So in these, the xylem and phloem tissues are the complex permanent tissues, and we are saying them complex permanent tissues. We had studied in class 9 that they are formed of various components, out of which xylems are mostly derived from dead cells, right? and phloem are derived from living cells. So xylem tissues are mainly helping in the transportation of water and minerals. And while they are doing this conduction of water and minerals, they do not require energy. Whereas in phloem, the conduction of food substances are taking place. Now in xylem, what is happening here? In xylem, the transfer is from roots to other part of plant. So we call it unidirectional. Whereas in plant, the foods are synthesized in leaf part. In leaves, right? Foods are synthesized in leaves, which are the green part of the plant. And we know from there, it gets transmitted to all part of plant, and we call it bidirectional, both in upward and downward direction, right? So here in phloem tissues, the product which are getting transmitted or transported by these tissues are requiring energy, right? So they require ATPs and they do not require energy source for the transmission. Here we will understand about transpiration. Now transpiration is basically the process which is helping in absorption, and along with that it is also helping in temperature regulation. So what is happening here in case of transpiration? When roots are taking water and minerals from the soil in upward direction, so this upward movement helping in temperature regulation of plant, because when it is coming in upward direction, this transpiration process is helping in suction of water and minerals from the soil. So in transpiration what will happen? The aerial part of plant will evaporate water. The water vapors will come while the section of water and minerals take place from the roots. So these water vapors coming from plant, aerial part of plant, they actually helping in the temperature regulation. And in case of food, in case of phloem, transmission takes place through translocation, where ATP are required to upward and downward movement of food substances and fulfill the requirement of required sources in different parts of the plant. Now excretion is the last subtopic of our today's discussion. In excretion, what we study is about the elimination of the waste product, as we have seen in the starting that how metabolic reactions are producing products which are essential for the body and some products which are formed and important to be removed or eliminated from the body. So here we talk about excretion of the elimination of waste product. So in humans, kidney is mainly responsible for the excretion process. Now when we talk about kidney is specifically for the removal of nitrogenous waste in the form of uric acid or urea. But there are other glands and other systems also which are responsible for the excretion. Like we have studied about lungs, where we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Similarly, sweat glands, right? And liver, which is helping in removal of toxic substances from our body. So and lungs, right? So all these systems are actually helping in the elimination of byproduct. But here we are going to discuss about kidney, and in kidney the waste product are in the form of uric acid or in form of urea, which are nitrogenous wastes. Now kidney have unit where the purification functions takes place, or we can say that urine formation takes place. That unit is known as nephron, and there are various millions of units of nephrons are present within the kidney which are helping in the formation of urine. What steps are actually involved in nephrons are basically filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. So these are the major steps of nephron when the urines are formed. The formed urine get collected into the collecting duct, and from there it passes to the renal vein, and the unabsorbed, the eliminated byproduct which is important to be eliminated get passed into the ureter. Ureter is basically the tube-like structure which is associated with urinary bladder, and this urinary bladder is actually a muscular part which expands when it collects the urine, and when central nervous system or brain signal is to urine and or urge of urination, it passes to the urethra, and through which the elimination of urea or uric acids is released. So these are the parts of excretory system in humans. And when we talk about nephrons, which is a unit of kidney, here what is happening? Filtration of blood is taking place, reabsorption of materials like minerals, ions to create a osmotic balance and maintain pH within the blood, and secretion, all the important things, important sources of ions and water get reabsorbed or secreted from the secretion part. And one thing more which we will see in your book is a diagram of Bowman capsule, in which you see a network of glomerulus efferent and efferent arterioles is connected with a tube-like structure which is having different parts, which is actually helping in the formation of urine or making urine more concentrated, because we are terrestrial organism and our body is manufactured or modified in a way to reabsorb water. Similarly, in plants also excretion takes place, because the byproducts which are harmful for plants also needed to be eliminated from the body. So here we have stomatal pores which are covered with the guard cells, helping in exchange of water and gaseous substances and regulating the inner and outer surrounding environment in a balanced form, right? Again, here transpiration, we have seen that it is helping in temperature regulation, and along with that the water vapors which are formed are helping in the release of some excretory products of the plant. Now these excretory products are stored in the form of vacuoles in plant, and they can either be present in the xylem tissues which are old in the form of resins and gums, which are secondary byproducts. So one thing you have to remember, that byproducts are always not a waste product, because byproducts which are eliminated from the body can be harmful for the organism which are producing it, but it can be necessary for other organisms, like for example CO2. CO2 is a byproduct for humans because it is important to be eliminated from the body, but CO2 is responsible for photosynthesis, as it is a main ingredient of photosynthesis. So there CO2 is required. So that's why we call it a byproduct, harmful for one, useful for another, right? So this much is from this chapter. I hope I made it clear to you all. All the best, and do hit the like button, and if you have any query you can write it in the comment section. Thank you for watching.